he really is probably one of the 3 to 5 most famous college football players, and he's barely ever played. And people are obsessed with him. I think that dynamic is interesting.
Yeah, I think it boils down to a few things. One, the last name combined with who and what position the guys that preceded him played. Both of his uncles played quarterback. His grandfather played quarterback. All of them very good. And then obviously Eli and Peyton are very much still in the national consciousness because they're on Monday night doing the Manning cast every week. So that's one part of it. And he plays that same position. The second part of it, I think, is the recruiting status. Anytime you have a guy who is a 5-star recruit, which Arch was, and he was
number one quarterback
recruit, number one quarterback, and by some services, the number one recruit overall in the class. That brings a lot of intrigue, no matter who you are. And he brought even more because it was a Manning. And 3, he's at a big time SEC school now. It's kind of weird to say that because Texas is his first year in the SEC, but he's at a big brand name program. And so far, the talent seems to lead us to believe that he's pretty good. I think the recruiting status, you think he's good, but we know how inexact it is. But now the limited action that we've seen, he looks like he's pretty damn good. So you get that on top of the fact that he's already in a depth chart with another guy who was, oh, by the way, number one recruit in America in his class, of Quinn Ewers, Heisman Trophy favorite before he got injured. I think all that stuff creates the narrative and the fascination with him. And the last part I'll give you is this: the mystery around him, because I think the Manning camp has been very intentional about not overexposing him, particularly when he was a recruit. If you remember, we covered his recruitment. He wasn't very available. He didn't talk very much. I don't think
nobody in the family was really talking much.
Yeah, he didn't do the camp circuit too much. So he wasn't out there like a modern recruit was. And Cooper even said that. His father, Cooper Manning, said he wanted to make it like a 1970s recruitment. And they did a really good job of that. And last year, while he was on campus all year, he was third string quarterback behind Malik Murphy, behind Quinn Ewers, and didn't really talk to us. We didn't talk to him until he got to the Sugar Bowl when he was the backup after Malik Murphy transferred. So there's a lot of mystery. There's still a lot of unknown about Arch because we don't really know Arch yet. We think we do, but we don't.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we really don't know anything about him. But I think there's an assumption, which is probably unfair. Well, I say probably. It's definitely unfair. There's an assumption because he's not just a 5-star recruit, not just the number one quarterback in his class, and not just a Manning, but all of those things together, that there's no chance that this guy won't be like a Hall of Fame quarterback with Super Bowls to his name when his time playing football is done, whenever that is. That might be the case. That might not be the case. But I think that there is an assumption from a lot of people that we're watching the early stages of the next great American quarterback. And maybe we are. But it feels like, I don't know how many Arch haters are out there. I don't know that there's that many. But I wonder if some people sort of get rubbed the wrong way by the assumption that he's just going to be great. I know during recruiting, there was definitely a lot of conversation about if his name was Arch Johnson, if he would be the number one recruit in the country. I don't do a lot of recruiting evaluations, so I kind of stayed out of that conversation. I think it's interesting. Some of the highlights from his high school, we kind of were like, I don't know, maybe. But what we've seen from him at Texas has been really impressive in the very small portions that we've seen. Never more impressive than what we saw on Saturday with 5 touchdowns. I wrote a column today, Sam, hitting on a lot of the reasons why Arch stayed. Because when Quinn elected to stay, well, I should go back. Even when Arch didn't play really his first season, I remember at the Sugar Bowl, he was kind of facing questions about the portal window had kind of, I think it had closed or it was close to closing. He hadn't gone in. And people were like, are you not, what's the deal? You're not going to, he was getting questions about transferring, which I thought was kind of weird. I'm like, this is pretty traditional. And then when Quinn elected to come back and chase a title, those questions came up again, and it was maybe a little bit more legitimate, maybe made more sense to a lot of people. But if you're actually looking at the 30,000 foot view, like the Mannings have with Arch the whole way, it didn't really make sense for 3 reasons that I laid out in the piece. One, you got a pretty good team coming back. Like you're still going to be at a really good program. Now you're the number one team in the country. So the faith that you had in Sark to build the program, continue the program off of last year's playoff has been rewarded. Texas is really good. They look like the best team in the country. We'll see. Whatever you want to say about Texas, they're clearly a national title contender. We'll see if they get there. 2, they don't really care about having the fastest route to the field. I think they recognize that it doesn't matter. And I think a lot of kids get really impatient, really antsy. And if you're great, you really are one good season away from being a first round pick if you're a quarterback. And in Arch's case, he's given the benefit of the doubt on so many things that he's really one season away from people really buying into it. So it's like, well, that's pretty easy. And then 2, NIL is completely irrelevant here. He had the Panini deal. He did they call it, which was, I guess, charity. That was like a 6-figure deal that they gave to charity. And then the college football playoff deal, we don't know what he made for that. It was definitely more than $600. I feel confident about that. But he wasn't going to opt in. Then he opts in late with the video with Peyton and Eli, which was actually pretty well done. So NIL, which is a huge factor in transfer decisions, no matter how much people want to pretend it's not, is not really a factor with him. They're not really, he has the family background where he doesn't necessarily have to care about, hey, this guy's offering me $800,000 or $1 million to transfer. They're chasing that second NFL contract, which everybody sort of talks about, but nobody really acts about. So you add all those things together, he was never going to transfer. And I think this idea was pure fan fiction. So, Sam, did I miss anything? Do you think there's any other factors at play here that people are kind of overlooking with Arch and this idea that he needed to transfer, that he couldn't be patient and wait for Quinn and wait his turn? Oh, and then also I forgot, Quinn gets hurt. It's unfortunate. Like Quinn's missed multiple games at least through 2 seasons. We'll see how long this oblique keeps him out. They called him week to week. I don't like that term. Day to day is what I'd want to hear. Week to week, that makes you nervous. And they got a pretty easy schedule coming up, which we'll get into. But Sam, any other factors that you feel like might be at play here?
I think I want to hone in the one you mentioned with the patience part is the development.
Yeah, that's true too.
This is going back to what I said about the recruitment and Cooper Manning and the Manning family's intention to treat this in an old school way. You know what quarterbacks used to do way back, even 20 years ago? They used to come to campus. They used to redshirt. They sat for 2 years, and then maybe as a redshirt sophomore or junior, then you're the starter. That's how it used to go. We have accelerated that timeline for myriad reasons. 1, because quarterbacks are more ready coming out of high school to do it. 2, the pressure on coaches to play your top flight quarterback recruit, because if you don't and you don't win, then you're going to get fired. That's another factor in it. Well, at Texas, Steve Sarkisian's in a secure place. He just got a massive contract extension. Arch Manning has Quinn Ewers in front of him. And, oh, by the way, if you watched him in his first semester a year and a half ago, when in that spring game when he played and he was the third quarterback,
not good.
Arch looked like he was swimming, like he was trying to stay afloat, because going from playing at a private school in New Orleans against a markedly lower level of competition to going up against big, fast defenders and windows that close really quickly, it was a little bit much. And Arch even talked about it. David, you were there with him in the Sugar Bowl. He talked about how hard it was even adjusting to being alone in your dorm room, being the third string quarterback, sitting here trying to learn the playbook, getting yelled at by Sark and AJ Milwee every day. and I'm sure the yelling wasn't always nice words.
Yeah.
That was an adjustment for him. And so often I think, and this is not just Arch specific, I think this is a college football thing. We try to fast forward everyone's development so quickly at the most difficult position in sports. And it often doesn't end well. I think about somebody like DJU, who at Clemson had all the success that very first year when he came in and subbed for Trevor Lawrence. And then the thing hasn't really gone quite as you would expect. Spencer Rattler, who was the 5-star recruit, had to transfer. Sometimes patience and development, I think, is the way to go. And I think the Mannings look at this as, hey, there's no need to rush. If Quinn leaves after the first year and then Arch starts, okay. But if not, then he's got time to ease himself in and develop and grow as a quarterback. And then fast forward a year and you look at the way he looks this year compared to the way he looked last year.
He looked pretty good.
He looks in command. He looks comfortable. He looks like he understands everything that's going on. It doesn't look like it's moving too fast for him anymore. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, but we just don't do it anymore. Even at the NFL level, we're starting rookie quarterbacks on day one. That boggles my mind that with all the money and resources and everything you have, that you have to start your rookie quarterback on day one. And we just saw Bryce Young get benched. I think that's an epidemic in the sport. And I think the Mannies have been really smart about being strategic with that. And oh, by the way, to your point about not wanting to leave, they spent 2 years in this recruiting process intensively, being very careful about where they chose to go. And one of the biggest reasons they chose Texas was to learn and develop under Sark. Why? Because Sark has worked with Matt Leinart. He's worked with Mac Jones, Tua Tagovailoa. He's worked with a laundry list, Jake Locker, a laundry list of big-time quarterbacks who have gone on to success in college football and been successful in the league. And they wanted to work with him and develop under him. And why would it make sense to leave after a year if that was your plan all along?